It only takes one person. So not every child gets the perfect start, but every child needs one person who doesn't give up on them. We often say, and especially here at Resilient Kid, it takes a village to raise a child. And sometimes that's true. But research consistently shows something powerful. The single greatest protective factor in a child's life is one stable, supportive adult. One person who shows up, who believes, who stays steady when things feel tricky or wobbly. Welcome to the Only Takes One Person, a special series on the Resilient Kid podcast. I'll begin by sharing my own reflections, and then we'll hear some powerful stories from people who had that one person, whether it was a parent, a teacher, a coach, or a mentor, and the lasting impact it had on their lives. Because resilience isn't built through perfection, it's built through connection. And sometimes one person is enough. Let's begin. Only Takes One Person, episode 1. The one who advocated. So I'm really excited to start this new series of podcast because I think it's really special. But before we dive into it, we are fresh off the stage. We just won Heart of the Community Award with Wool Manifest. Whoop, whoop. What a moment. Standing there, holding that award. What struck me wasn't just that we won, but who was in the room. The runner-up that evening was a good friend of the show, Deb Dixon, who she does cardiac screening work for cardiac risk in the young in memory of her son, Aaron, who died far too early. She works tirelessly and fundraises so that other families don't have to go through that same experience, that same heartbreak. And I was lucky enough to host a table that night, and Debbie was sat with us as a real friend and who is really good fun. She's one of my favourite humans. She's funny, she's mischievous, she's deep, and she's fiercely loyal, which what more could you ask for in a friend? And when all the finalists went up on stage at the beginning, and when our name was called, Deb got runner-up, and I just turned to her. I won't use the exact language I used. What I said is, oh my God, if you've come runner-up, raising over $750,000, who's come first? And then our name was called, and we were just so pleased, so proud, and very, very grateful. But here's what I kept thinking. Behind every award, every movement, every program, there's always a person. And that's what this new series is about, because research consistently shows that the greatest protective factor in a child's life isn't money, school, or even circumstance. It's one stable, supportive adult, just one. And I'm going to tell you who mine was in a minute. But actually, that night, sat at the table listening to some really inspiring stories, particularly apart from Deb, there was also a firefighter. In fact, she's in charge of quite a lot of stations. And she gave her story. And that is where the idea of this series came from. Wait and see. I've reached out and asked her to come on the podcast, so I won't drop a name yet until she says yes. But let's get into it. Let's hear about who that person was for me. That was Auntie Vera, or as we lovely and very lovingly call her, Auntie V. So let me tell you, I was 21. I just finished a psychology degree, and it was it was the summer as I'd finished uni, and I was traveling around South America with friends. At the time, my parents had moved down south. I stayed up north, being loyal northern girl, and I was living, or I'd moved my stuff in, with Auntie V before I went off travelling. And while I was away, she received a call, and it was a professor running the counselling course I'd applied for, due to start that September. And he asked for me. She said, oh, what's it regarding? And he said, unfortunately, she's too young. We won't be able to accept her on the course. Too young. Now, my Auntie V was not someone who quietly accepted decisions. And born to a Jewish mum and Irish Catholic dad, she never took things lying down. So she questioned him calmly and firmly. She said things like, do you know that she was born in South Africa? Do you know she travelled back there alone at 13? Do you know she grew up in a multi-generational household? Do you know that she helps to care at 21 for her grandparents? Do you know what she's navigated in her life, including her dad having a nervous breakdown? Do you know why? That's exactly why she chose psychology. She didn't shout, she advocated. She didn't just talk him into reconsidering. She probably pecked his head until he said yeah. But she talked him to giving me a place. And I became the youngest person ever to be accepted onto that course. And I'll be forever grateful. But here's the thing. She changed the trajectory of my life. She showed me what it would look like if somebody advocates outside your immediate family for you. She showed me what belief in me looked like. Not somebody who had to, because Auntie V was a powerhouse. She was tiny. She was less than 5 foot. And she wasn't a real auntie, as in the bloodline. She was one of my mum's very best friends. And she was a powerhouse. And so to hear her advocate for me at a time I wasn't even in the room, let alone the country. She advocated for me, and she showed me that sometimes somebody else sees your strength before you own it, especially at 21. You don't know what you're made of at that point. Now, I will say, traveling to South America with a group of friends does show you what you're made of quite quickly. Particularly because, and I remember her saying that she mentioned this. So it was at a time before mobile phones. I didn't get a mobile phone until I was 22, and it certainly wasn't a smartphone. But at that time, we didn't have mobile phones. So I would ring home once a week. That was the deal with my mum. I would ring home, and I happened to ring, and my mum then rang Auntie V. There was a bit of a chain, Auntie Pat, Banana. They all rang round because I would only have rang home. And at the time that call came in, I was in a village where the only currency was bread. And you had to go to another town, buy the bread, and go to this little village. So you couldn't hand over money. You handed over literal bread. If you wanted anything, if you wanted a drink, if you wanted to buy something, you had to buy it with bread. Lo and behold, if you got waylaid moving to that village and it was stale, you wouldn't have got anything for your bread. So, when we talk about here, about bread being money, it literally was there. But do you know what? I remember Auntie V recanting the story to me and telling me that's the kind of thing she told him. And I'll never forget Peter, actually, because I never forget what he said to me when I joined the course. My God, everybody needs somebody like your Auntie V in their corner. She was not letting me go until I said yeah. And that phone call shaped my life. This year marks 30 years of me being on that journey towards becoming and being the therapist I am today. 30 years, my goodness. But it began because of that one person refused to accept no on my behalf. That is the power of that one person. That is the power of love and of care, but it is the power of one person who sees something in you that maybe you don't see in yourself. And how many of our teens now don't see their worth, don't see their strengths. And it's one of the reasons why I started the job I do. Is one of the reasons why we brought the coaches on. And I think it's this podcast series has been a bit of a perfect storm, really. We ran an anxiety workshop last week, and at the end of the call, there was so if you're one of our parents, if you're one of our paying parents, you get free access to those workshops. They are only £25 anyway, but you get free access to that. So there's a lot of parents on there. There's lots of people who wanted to know about anxiety. But at the end of this call, and it was a lady down south, and she was absolutely lovely. And we go through the topic for an hour, and then you can ask questions. And I can't remember. I think it was around children not wanting to go into school and being anxious to go into school was the question, or the question was around that. And so we answered it. But at the end, she went, I want a coach, because the coaches were there, and some of the people, some of the families that they work with were there. And I'm going, is it right that SJ's your coach, or is it right that Emily's your coach, or Fiona's your coach? And she just said at the end, I want one. I want a coach. And it's, of course we do. We all need that. We all need to know somebody's in our corner. And so that, and with the award, is how this came about, really. But it's why I care so deeply, really, about the work that we do here at The Resilient Kid. For some children, we might be that person. For teens, one coach believing in them changes everything. That can be a teacher. I have plenty of teens and I go into high schools all the time. One of the first questions I ask is, who's in your corner? Who's the teacher that you know has got your back? And that might be, like last week, there was a young student who was having a really tricky week, and their person, their advocate, who is a teacher who runs a big department, had emailed round that morning and said, I know he's got trainers on and I know he's not supposed to, but please let it slide for today. He's having a really tricky week. And I told my student that teacher's advocated for you today. He said, oh, that's really funny, because one of the deputy heads came up to me, looked at my shoes, went to say something and stopped themselves and just said, good morning. And he said, I thought, oh, it's not like them not to tell me off. But how lovely. For that teacher, it's just an email. For that kid, it's massive, because that would have just tipped him, over the edge that day. So for parents even, sometimes one workshop shifts how we see our kids. For teachers, it might be some training that helps them stay regulated, to not bring in all the rubbish from home into the classroom and vice versa, to leave school at the door and go home and be with their kids, have something left in the tank to go home and be with their own families. It's not about perfection. It's not 24/7. It's consistency. It's feeling safe with that person, and it's their belief. And I think the ripple effect of that kind of thing is absolutely extraordinary. We're really lucky because we get to see it from all sides. The coaches and I are all parents, thank God. We're all parents, most days, thank God. But no, we are. We've all worked in education settings. We have good relationships with the teachers. We go in to deliver CPD. And because of that, we get to hear those stories, because that's what we do. We go in and we listen to them, the TAs, the teachers that are on the ground. So we hear what they are having to deal with. We work one-to-one with the kids. We're really lucky in that way, really lucky. I think what I want to say to you is, when I stood on that stage accepting the Heart of the Community Award, I thought about Auntie V, and I thought that didn't just start with me. It started when somebody advocates. And I think really that's what we want for our kids, don't we? We want them to understand we've got their back. It isn't always easy when we're also saying, pick up your socks from the floor, tidy your bedroom, have you done your homework, have you started revising, have you brushed your teeth even, get in the shower. That, for them, doesn't feel like we've got their back. And sometimes, depending on the narrative, if you've had a meeting at school and the kids come, oh, you didn't help me. But also that depends on the narrative that's been spun to them. But for them to know that we have their back, but also that I always think, doesn't matter what we say as parents, somebody outside of that immediate family has so much more of an impact than we do. I will often say, if there is something specific you need to speak to your child about, have they got a coach in their life, as in a sports coach or a coach like us, or if they've got a teacher at school that they really trust, ask them to have that conversation, because it lands differently for them. It absolutely lands differently. And I think it's amazing if our kids, our teens have got that person. I hope whoever's listening to this today, and this is going to be a short one because this is just a very small intro into the series, but anybody who's listening today, I hope you have that person. I have got several people in my life, and I know how lucky I am, and I am very grateful for that, who keep me grounded, who challenge me to do more, to do better, to go bigger, to take up space. I have people who will pick up the phone and say congratulations, but I'll also have people who will pick up the phone and say, you messed up there. What did you do that for? And that's what we need. We need those kind of people in our life. And so this series is about that. In the coming weeks, I'm going to be interviewing people who had that one person, and you'll hear how it shaped their lives. But today, I'd love you to reflect. Who was yours? Who believed in you? Who stood up for you when you thought others couldn't or wouldn't? Who saw something in you before you saw it in yourself? We would love to hear your story, because resilience isn't built in isolation. It's built in relationships. It's built in connection. And sometimes it only takes that one person. So next week, you're going to meet our first guest, who is a very special person. And I can't wait to tell you more about her. But I want to leave you with this. Who was your person? Who was your Auntie V? Drop us a message at ashley@theresilientkid.co.uk or DM us on the socials and tell us, who was that person for you?